Hi, Alex and Janik. So you've been on a lot of hackathons recently, and you've won quite a few as well. Now, I would love to know, I would love to know, like, what tools did you use, especially because during digital product school, you already used a lot of AI tools. What has been your workflows, and what can you recommend? What's your experience? Do you want to start maybe with a short introduction, who you are, what you do, what you've been up to recently?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Alex. I've been a part of DPS batch 22. I've been working with Yannick. So I was the software engineer at that time, working with a construction site company on building a management system. I am or was a bachelor student in information systems. I just finished my bachelor's. And since then, I went on a lot of hackathons and I'm trying to start a company.
Awesome. Yeah, and actually, I also met Alex during DPS, so I was also part of batch 22, and yeah, worked on the same project with him. It was a pleasure. I was the AI engineer at this kind of project, and I also afterwards stayed in contact with Alex. We participated at most of those hackathons together. We won a couple of them, and yeah, we really like to ideate fast and to vibe code. So I think I'm really looking forward for this conversation.
Cool. What is vibe coding?
So actually, there was like Henry Capati, who was like one of the co-founders of OpenAI, and I think in 2023 he said like the hottest new programming language is English, and that was basically which started everything. So later there was another tweet which was like I think even this year, so it's quite new, where he said it's not really like coding, it's more like seeing things how they run and copy pasting things, and mostly it works in the end. So basically like just trying to vibe with the code while still staying a little bit up to date about what you do, but not knowing everything in perfect detail. I think this would describe it quite well.
Interesting. Very cool. So even me as a let's say business person, I could program.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, cool. Now I'm very curious. That's really, really cool. I think for everybody who wants to build a startup or, like start an idea, yeah, that empowers like people to just, yeah, bring their ideas to life, which is super awesome. What tools have you tried and which ones can you recommend and which ones maybe not so much?
I mean, for ideation, if you look at kind of the first part of starting with an idea, it always makes sense to actually use an LLM before prompting tools like Lovable or stuff like that. We will get into it later to actually refine the idea a bit and even find an idea. This also works quite well. The two examples that work really well there are Grok, which is the AI model from Twitter or X now, probably the most creative model, which is really cool, and it has access to the live Twitter feed, which actually helps really well in sourcing ideas that are up to trends and work really well in current environments. It's, let's say, the most up to date. A second tool that I can really recommend is AI Studio. It's from Gemini, it's from Google. Google has a wild naming schema, so AI Studio is the part where you actually find this, and it has probably the largest context window. So if you have pitch decks or like reports you find interesting about a topic, images you like as inspiration, you can throw that all in. I did it for an exam once. You could throw like 2,000 pages in and it works really well. And then kind of get starting. And you always start the prompt with, I have this and this idea. Create me a prompt that works really well for Lovable or something like that. So you can create the prompt and then copy paste this prompt to jump into the next category of tools. Maybe Yannick can tell you what's out there for this.
Just one question. What about ChatGPT or
Mhm.
Perplexity or like are they because those are the ones that I use. I haven't used Grok, for example. I've used AI
Mhm.
Studio, but
So basically, I think they are also quite nice because there's this deep research feature where you can basically generate those long reports and have those in-depth reviews of some problems. But like Alex already mentioned, I think a very big advantage of Grok with a live feed, I mean, it also has a deep research feature, which is probably not as good as ChatGPT. So for proper reports, maybe the deep research feature of ChatGPT is better at the moment. But with the live news, for example, when you have a new model which is coming out, like let's say, for example, O3 Pro from OpenAI, and it has some new capabilities, but you're not yet aware, how can I actually build a product around those? You can just go to the Grok chat interface and say, So what were cool use cases people came up with the new O3 Pro model? And since it's having the live news of the Twitter feeds, it will probably find some really cool use cases which you didn't think of before and which you don't find in dev reports, which you scrape through the internet. So I think this is like the big edge.
That's awesome. Yeah, cool. Are you spending money on any of those AI tools? Like, what are you spending money on at the moment?
So I think the free tiers actually work pretty well. Like I have used ChatGPT Pro once or twice, but I really come by with the free tiers. And especially if you look into the next category where you kind of go from a prompt to an app, even there, it's a bit limited. So most of them are, for example, limited to 5 prompts a day, but even that is enough to get started with an idea. And if we want, we can jump into this next part of
Perfect.
let's say tools. You might have already heard of Lovable. There's out Bolt, V0, and Fire Studio is the fourth up and coming one. I would just quickly run through the four and tell you what's special and what makes them unique. Lovable is, I think it's a European company, a Swedish company. It has been getting quite popular. I actually use it this weekend at a hackathon. So I think what makes it unique is that Lovable is probably the easiest to build a fully fledged website, so a front end and a back end, and you can directly connect a database in the front in Lovable, so you don't have to touch anything. It works really well. And I think Lovable is unique in that in this case, it's the best. A downside to this is you can't actually download your code, which hinders you in kind of the next steps. That's something that V0 does really well. So V0 has the same setup. You set one prompt and you get an app out of it, but you can download the code and then put it into your favorite IDE, VS Code, Cursor, stuff like that. We will get to these tools later. But you can have a quick ideation and then refine it, especially if you already know a bit more about coding. This can be really helpful to be really surgical about stuff, because with Lovable and also other tools, you start out with a cool idea and then you can change things, but you're on this top level. So if you want to change a very small thing, you run into the risk that you break your whole thing, because it's nothing where you can say just change this small thing. That's one thing. And Bolt is really interesting for DPS actually, because it has a Figma integration. So they came out, I think, 1 or 2 months ago, where you can just copy paste a Figma link, put it in as context, and it directly generates you the code for this Figma. It's really interesting. I haven't been using it as much as the other two tools, but it's definitely something checking out if you have this context already and you're not just starting from an idea. And the fourth, it's from Google Firebase, Fire Studio. I'm not sure how it's called exactly, but it's been an up and coming player, and it's really interesting because it has based from Firebase, which is one of the biggest providers for, let's say, deployment services. So they could actually become one of the big players. Let's see.
Nice. And what do I do next?
Yes, so that's basically a good question because it depends on which service you use. Like, for example, with Lovable, which Alex was already mentioning, you can just stay within the tool and build directly from there. And the same thing is like for the new AI tool from Google, like the Firebase Studio, I think it was called, right? I think you can also directly build in the web IDE, basically. But I think the workflow for us at most of the hackathons was either like building it fully in Lovable, like Alex mentioned, but in more cases, we actually used V0, where you just have components and you can download the code. So what we do there is we basically, in the beginning, like just build us a nice front end or prompt a nice front end, let's say it more like this. And then when we are happy, we just download the code and put it into Cursor. And this is like the IDE we use for this kind of use case because it has very good integrations for large language models. It even has an agent mode. And this is really cool. So for example, you put in the code there, and then you have a prompt, like for example, I don't know, give me a backend. And usually it would just update the code and you could like accept the changes, but now it can directly also go through your whole file structures, like do some terminal commands and look at the directory, like which kind of files are there, what am I missing, and it's basically looking for context while it's building your backend. I mean, obviously, you still should have the vibe that it's doing the right thing, right? That's why it's vibe coding. but it definitely helps you building a faster workflow. So we basically download the code, set up a folder structure, like for example, front end, back end. So we have still some kind of structure in the project, put in, and then we prompt Cursor and see how we can actually build an app out of.
So this is one example. This is built in Lovable. You can actually see in the top right corner in the deployment that it is lovable.app. So you can directly deploy it from Lovable. Everybody could open it and look at it. This was a dashboard for a teacher that would be working with kids that use VR. That's kind of the context of it. But it's a nice example to actually see that you have this classroom, like it's really good in doing graphs and dashboards. This is actually connected to SuperBase, which is a database application, which you can directly in SuperBase by just clicking buttons connect. So you don't have to write any code to connect the database and stuff like that. Lovable takes care for this. And so this is real data. It's really nicely put together with animations and everything. So it also does this. And you can kind of see that it also has these different layers to it. It also is able to think of dummy data. So in this case, parts of it are real data that you source from the database. Part of it is something that Lovable kind of comes up on its own to showcase its use cases. And you can also add chat features, stuff like this. And as I said, this is completely built in Lovable and a great example of how, from an end-to-end standpoint, this works really well. But maybe Janik has something to show as well, which we've built at another hackathon.
I think
Can I ask one question? So at the Digital Products Pool, we do a lot of user testing, right? So we come up with an idea, then we prototype it, and then we bring it in the hands of users and ask them to test it and think out loud. Is this deployed on the web, right? So I can just send it to users and do user interviews?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a really interesting feature that Lovable offers. You can directly deploy it and kind of show it to users directly. We in hackathons often use Netlify as a second option where you can deploy your downloaded code really easy through GitHub. So this is another option, but it has reached a point where you can, in probably 1 hour or less, build something just from an idea that is showcaseable, that is usable, and that you can give a user, actually also collecting user data to get a bit more context. It often kind of depends on what you want to achieve. If I think Figma, for example, or other tools are a bit more optimized to analyze user interaction. So this obviously is a web app meant to be used, not meant to be analyzed. Sometimes it makes sense to have stuff like how long is somebody looking at this?
Yeah.
Is he able to achieve this and that in the app? You can have these testing workflows, if I remember correctly, but it's a really interesting new dimension if you rapidly want to kind of check a hypothesis.
Is it working interactively? So if I have input fields and I do that, it really update stuff in the backend and
yeah, absolutely. Like in this case, like it's in my case, the example I showed, we actually had VR headsets hooked up to it. So if you press something in the VR world, it would be transferred and you would have, for example, somebody raising their hand in the front end. That's absolutely possible and pretty easy to do, as I said, because you hook up a backend to it. So the backend is fully functional, storing the data and being able to be reacting to what's happening. As I said, one downside you have with Lovable is that you can always only chat from a top level. So you can only say, do this and that, and not say you can't say, change it in this file, but in Cursor, you have the file in front, you reference it. It's built for top level coding. So this sometimes is able to break your application pretty easily because if it changes stuff in the backend, changes stuff in the front end, you can always reverse stuff, but not in the backend. So it's something to keep in mind when using these tools to not get too crazy or too creative with it. But there are definitely options to reverse it as well.
Awesome. Very cool. Janik, I didn't want to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No. It's fine. I think I also don't have a very good backend example right now, which I came up with so fast. But I think a cool thing for DPS to show, which is also possible with Cursor, is with Lovable. Let me present. So this screen, for example, this is an app, and I will just show you the onboarding workflow because I think it's easier to do it like this.
Can you give a background? Is it from a hackathon or what
Yeah,
is?
exactly. So we basically, at the last TumeAI Makeathon, we built this kind of project, which is Manifold, and we basically built an onboarding workflow. And what I can remember from DPS is that I think we have lots of stuff in there which is probably not necessary and which you can simplify. So I think this is a good example for to just go through our workflow, because this could be like a first iteration for a team to like build a workflow, like an onboarding workflow, like in, for example, Duolingo would have, and then go through it and see like, oh, do we really need to ask this question, or is this redundant? So maybe we can just go quickly through this and rip this product. So we have this Welcome to Medical, which is like an all-in-one health tracking companion. And there you can get started. And basically what we wanted to do is we wanted to have a central platform for yourself where you can upload your diet records. Like, for example, like there are now this Rewe Ebong receipts which you can get and download, and you can put them there. You can also put photos of yourself, for example, when you feel ill or something, just upload a selfie at this day and write a short note like, I'm feeling ill, and also your medical records. And we basically just wanted to have this as a prompt for a large language model so it can give you a good recommendation based on all those records. So here we basically say, upload those documents. Do you want to have weekly health insights? And basically all this was vibe coded. Like none of us were there and were like, okay, let's adjust this button. Let's change this color. It was just like, please, Cursor, can you make it look beautiful? And basically that was it. And yeah, then we had to stay updated. Let's get personal. So yeah, like getting the first information of the user to log the user in, right? Then you can just select some information about yourself, your age, sex, height, weight, etc. And then basically create your account and then register and continue. Like I'm not going to register now, but just as a short example for DPS, I think this would be pretty cool to like go very fast about this onboarding workflow. And you could share it already with other people and they could say and give you feedback like you were talking about bit before.
That's awesome. Can you show us how you did it in Cursor or like the how it looks under the hood, basically?
I could open the code. Wait, let me stop screen sharing for a second. I could basically take a look at the code. Um, Let me find the project.
Maybe while Yannick is looking it up, I have a question for Alex. You've been a great tandem. Like you've been working really great together. How did you work together? How did you collaborate on projects? Because you were also having a lot of fun and you were joking around. It was like, wow, this is an awesome team, right? Like, so what's your secret? How do you collaborate that it works?
So during the DPS, and I think also during hackathons, in order to work on your own or in parallel, let's say, it's important to have it in this end stage of having it in Cursor. So when you have it in Cursor, it's more of a normal workflow you have with other developers where you divide tasks, work on different branches, and kind of merge them in the end. It just makes it a lot faster and sometimes enables people to build stuff that they wouldn't have been able to do and won't have to learn. And good example is myself, where I wasn't really capable of front-end programming before DPS, but I was able to leverage Cursor to learn a lot more about it, learn a lot faster about it because I could prompt it, let him create a front-end design, and then take a look at what actually happened code-wise to work on it, which I then could always also ask Yannick and stuff like that. During hackathons, we have seen actually a funny thing where it's often better to kind of pair program or prompt it together because you're limited or restricted anyways. If like Lovable starts coding, it takes, I would say, Lovable as an example, takes like a minute or two to kind of work through your prompt, change everything and do all of this stuff. So oftentimes you have these downtimes where you can talk about stuff, talk about next steps, but you're not really able to parallelize it that well.
Mhm.
Like having different tasks to work on, that's something that's still, let's say, necessary to do in Cursor. But I think like looking at DPS, makes sense anyways, because building in Lovable is really something for like temporary projects or something you just want to show quickly. If you
Yeah.
have a fully fledged product, you also have to understand the code, right?
Yeah.
So having a Cursor as a aid is great, but you still have to look at the code and kind of work through it, and then you're back into this normal software developer world where you can divide tasks and create branches, stuff like that.
Yeah, I can quickly go over to my screen again. It's still installing the dependencies, so I can't run it locally right now, but it should already show the code. So wait, let me show the screen. There we go. So basically, maybe I can even do a split screen here. Sorry. Let me do it like this. And then also the screen here on this side. So wait, I will show it to you in a second and explain exactly. This is Cursor. So this is where the magic happens. And basically, what we have over here is now for the developers and us who are watching. So we basically have a structure here. It's not like we just vibe coded without any folder structures. Like for example, here we have a components folder, and this components folder, a component is basically an element that you can see on the website. For example, this is a component. And now when we go through the components, we basically can take a look at all of them. So here we have the onboarding workflow, and we have for each different step, we have one component. So if we go back, this should be the welcome screen where we have the Manifold logo, which you can see over here. And then we have like the title and the description. And none of this was coded by humans, right? This was all coded by AI. And it's quite nice because this way it's still maintainable. Because an issue I see with lots of vibe coders right now is they don't think at all about the project structure, and they don't. I mean, you don't need to fully understand your code. Don't get me wrong, I don't fully understand this code either. But in general, you should have a little overview about like how your project is structured and where you can find the right information. And I think if you're still following normal basic design principles and you have, for example, components, you can directly take a look at the component and change stuff. So for example, if you say, okay, I don't really like this, now we can go fully into Cursor. There are multiple options. So you are all in one health tracking companion. So what you could do is you could write it yourself, but you can also just hit Control and K and then say something. This is not a good description of the product. Make it more punchy. And then you can basically say it to the model, and it says, okay, revolutionize your healthcare journey with powerful tracking and insights. I don't know, it's a bit longer, but it's definitely more punchy, right? So as you can see, this was how easy you can change stuff in there.
That's awesome. This is really cool, but how do you also, so me as a non-techie, how do I find out, like, how do I look for the code line where it's like, okay, I want this to be red. So I know a little bit of PHP, a little bit of HTML, but it was our CSS. But it was like 10 years ago. But maybe
I,
I still read a little bit, and I just need to find these places to add, to change color and so on. How would you do that?
That's a very good question. I think in that case, we could just chat with Cursor and see if it finds it out. So basically, let's try it out. I'm not sure. So let me close this document so it doesn't have it already as context. I will save the changes because they are beautiful. And now we want to change the welcome screen, right? So usually it would take this as context, but now I didn't provide any context at all, so it needs to look in the document. So what I can do now is basically go into agent mode, for example. I think that's easier because then and this enables tool calls, which basically means it can look for directories and stuff like this. So basically what we have here is, hey, I want to change the logo in the onboarding, for example, like the welcome screen we saw right there. Onboarding welcome screen. In which file do I need to take a look? And we can just see if it works. And we can also select the model here. Usually it's on auto. Let's try with auto first because it's a default option. I'm not sure if it works, but I think this would be the perfect thing for a demo if it would work actually. So let's try. So what you can see now is it's doing a call. Search codebase for onboarding welcome screen logo. So it's already doing a call. Okay, tool call timed out. This has to do with my internet. This is working. Search file welcome screen, red welcome screen TSX. Okay, so basically it says it's in the welcome screen TSX file, and actually the part of it where you need to change the logo, it's called image. So let's look with Control F. You can also just go through the document. And then we have it here. Yeah, this is the same. So here we can change the logo of the welcome screen.
No way. That's awesome. That's really cool. That's really cool. And what if I need to, how do I, where can I see the back end? Can I change stuff there as well? Or do I not even need to do that? Or
maybe we can have oh, sorry, do you want to go, Alex? I cannot.
Yeah, I think we can take a look at it, but I think the step of importing the code into Cursor, Windsurf, whatever, is something for non-technical people that doesn't really make sense. I think at that point, using something like Lovable that provides this end-to-end context
Yeah.
absolutely makes sense.
Okay.
But like this example, it worked.
Yeah.
But what I often see if somebody non-technical works with it, he gets stuck in the basics of using IDEs, programming languages, and gets stuck in problems where Cursor also gets stuck.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of both don't know really what to do.
Yeah.
And I think especially maybe in the DPS context,
Yeah.
the AI engineers, software engineers, they just get 10 times faster with this,
Yeah.
but they know what happens.
Yeah.
But like looking at the backend, SuperBase is a great option that's really user friendly. But if you have never used the backend, it is kind of tough to understand.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Nice. That's really cool. What are some other workflows and things that you were like where you were like super amazed by and you're like, hey, this is awesome. People should know about this, or like what are your
Yeah, like
highlights of the workflows or tools?
I think from a developer perspective, I just had a very big aha moment for myself because there's something new which is called MCP. It's like Model Context Protocol. And I can quickly wait. Maybe I can, how can I show it without leaking an API key? Give me 1 second. I need to figure something out. I think I can actually go into, I have an idea.
Go
So we
into the
can go.
cursor settings.
I can go into the canvas and go to the slide because this is perfect. So actually, let me just take a short look at this MCP kind of thing. Basically, Model Context Protocol is an open protocol that standardizes how application provides context and tools for LLMs. And basically, what SuperBase is, it's a backend database. And working with databases and backend can really be a backend. So I'm sorry, I didn't know if I can say that. But in general, it's like very hard to connect those kind of things, and there's easy stuff that can go wrong. So what those MCP servers do is basically you connect with your cursor, the database, and then you give the large language model or the ChatGPT in cursor basically some functions with how it can interact with the database and give a very long context explanation for it. So for example, when I want to create a new database table, there are usually some commands which are required, and I would need to look them up, and then I would need to design the database. And this is something that happens mostly independently of my backend, and in the end, I'm trying to connect it. And this is kind of hard because I need to connect to elements, and especially at hackathons, it's costing you lots of time. But what Cursor can now do, it can basically via an API access your database in the web, and then you have, for example, a function called create table, and it can automatically work at this website through your Cursor IDE, and it can basically do this for all kind of websites. It's like databases is just a use case I really like because it's very hard to do otherwise. And as soon as you basically give Cursor permissions to also edit your database, also do it with caution, of course, because it can mess stuff up badly. But it really helps because it can think holistically about the project. So when it's designing the backend, it can also directly think about the database, and it's like also connected right now. So this was really a big eye-opener for me from a development perspective. I think it's nothing too relevant for UX designers, but it's for a developer. Really take a look at MCP servers. It's very easy if you take a look into it, and it helps a lot. It really helps a lot. I just wanted to emphasize that.
Thank you. That's amazing. Alex, what is your favorite or what do you love the most?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Cursor is definitely the biggest unlock, I would say, for software developers to work with. I was really impressed by Lovable this weekend, how much you could actually do in an end-to-end context where you never or almost never look at the code. I think in a DPS context, the bold Figma integration is really interesting. I have never tried it myself, but I can shortly share my screen and show you what to look for.
Yeah.
So if you go on the Bold website, actually, you can so this is like most websites look in this context. What do you want to build? You can type your prompt here, as we said. Like creating a prompt with an AI makes more sense because then the details are more thing. But you can see here, import from Figma, and then you would be able to just put in a Figma link, and it gives all of this as context, which can be super interesting because we in DPS always had this let's say discussion or like this connection point between design and software development, where we always had to align between creating the design, creating it in the actual product, and going back and forth. So I think this, if somebody wants to try it out, take a look at it and just try it out, can be super interesting, because if you put in the design of your designer, you can probably just extract big code chunks of it. And if you understand what's going on, this is actually really helpful for you. So that's I think a cool example to actually see.
Nice. Very, very cool. So now we went from idea to prototyping to deploying it as a web IDE. Wow, that's really cool. I remember like when there was like low code coming up, I was trying to use Bubble, but it was super tedious. And now it's really awesome that I can actually chat with my own project and tell them like, oh, I need to change color and which is awesome. Nice.
And it's also important because it has been gotten so much better. We did DPS from September to December. And I know that Janik and I connected, like as one of the many topics we connected over was actually using at that time V0 and trying to build our own projects with it. And at that time, so 8 months ago, V0 wasn't good enough to actually work in a really good way. Like we built small projects and it would do 3 or 4 files for you and be very, very basic. You wouldn't be able to connect any backend to it. You wouldn't able to connect any animations to it. It wouldn't work well. And now I think like the last time we used it was 2-3 months ago. So in the span of 5 months, it has become so good that you're now at this point where a non-technical person could almost be completely able to build an end-to-end application with a backend, with a front end by its own, which is, I think, super interesting. And obviously,
Same.
it's just uphill from there.
Yeah.
Just one last thing I would like to add here, because I think this would also be a nice way to show how this actually evolved. There's basically a website called Chatbot Arena. And what this website does, it looks for different use cases of large language models and how good they perform and rates them through an ELO system like in chess. And basically, when we were at DPS, there were like models like, I think Gemini 1.5 Pro was already there, I think. So we had an ELO of 892, and you have to think about it that like going higher is way harder, like especially for the higher kind of scores than it was before. Like going from 600 to 800 was way easier than going from 1000 to 1200. And right now the best LLM is at 1490. So they got way more capable. And I just wanted to show this website because when you are looking for a large language model, for example, for a web dev task like here, you can just go on this website and you can select in Cursor the model you want to use yourself. And obviously you can do it by using your intuition and thinking, okay, this model feels the best. This is obviously the vibe coding way to do it. But if you want to go through it very like logically, you can just go through to this website and basically see, okay, Gemini 2.5 Pro preview is the best model right now. All the people say it's empirically proven. I will use this model. But I think, so I just wanted to add this resource in the end because I think it's also very valuable and shows how much better those models gotten over time.
That's so cool, yeah. Any other resources or tools that you recommend? Like, for example, I heard Gamma is very good for presentations, or I don't know, other things that you like?
I think it's a good question. I think we showed most of the tools we basically used for the hackathons, to be honest.
That's perfect, yeah. Nice. Thank you so much. That was really impressive and really cool. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and workflows.